Crisis is not the end. That is the first truth we must hold on to when we look around at a world that seems to be unraveling before our very eyes. The news headlines, the collapsing institutions, the rising sense of uncertainty. These can feel overwhelming, even paralyzing. But history teaches us something different, something powerful. Every crisis, no matter how devastating, opens a doorway that was previously closed. What feels like the destruction of stability is, in fact, the clearing of ground for new possibilities. Think for a moment. What if the storm you fear is not your downfall, but the beginning of your rise? What if the collapse of the old is the birth of the new? That is the hook we must never forget. Every generation before us has been tested by crisis, and those who chose to see beyond the smoke and rubble were the ones who shaped history. When the Great Depression ravaged economies worldwide, it looked like the end of modern society. People lost jobs, homes, and hope. Yet from that same chaos came new labor rights, new social safety nets, and a new understanding that human beings could demand fairness from the system that had failed them. It was not the end of possibility, it was the beginning of change. The same is true today. When systems crack, when institutions we trusted reveal their weaknesses, we must not cower in fear. We must step forward with vision. Crisis feels final because it strips away the comfort of what we knew, but that is exactly why it is transformative. The walls that once contained us crumble, and suddenly we see farther than before. If the rules that governed yesterday no longer hold, why should we remain bound by them? This is the hidden gift of crisis. It forces us to ask questions we had long avoided. Why should inequality be accepted as natural? Why should endless wars, corruption, and exploitation be tolerated as the price of progress? Why should our lives be lived at the mercy of systems that collapse the moment they are tested? In crisis, the answers come alive. We don't have to accept it. We can build differently. And let us be clear, transformation does not come by waiting. It comes by action. When the ground shakes beneath your feet, you have two choices. You can fall with the old structure, or you can plant new foundations. Imagine a forest after a wildfire. At first, it looks like death has won, but beneath the ashes, seeds are waiting. The destruction clears the way for a new ecosystem, more resilient and alive than the one before. That is what crisis can be for us if we choose it. The fire may rage, but it also reveals the strength we did not know we had. The question then is not whether crisis will come. It always does. The real question is, what will we do with it? Will we let it define us as victims, or will we define ourselves as builders of something greater? Will we surrender to despair, or will we see the cracks as the light pouring through? That choice belongs to us, and only to us. So, when you feel the weight of crisis pressing down, remember this truth. It is not the end of your story. It is the opening of a new chapter. The ending is only final if you let it be. But if you rise, if you gather strength, if you dare to see opportunity where others see only ruin, then you are no longer a spectator to history, you are its author. Real power has never belonged to those who sit in palaces, boardrooms, or government offices pretending to rule over us. It has always come from ordinary people, People who wake up every morning to work, to create, to build the very foundations on which those same rulers stand. History is not made by those at the top. It is written by those who refuse to surrender at the bottom. That is the truth so often hidden from us, and yet it is the truth we must claim. Ask yourself who truly keeps society alive, the handful of executives behind closed doors, or the millions of workers who move the wheels of the world every single day. The hook that must capture your imagination is this: every empire that ever claimed to be invincible fell not because its leaders willed it, but because ordinary people rose up, stood together, and refused to carry its weight any longer. Think of the civil rights movement. Think of labor unions fighting for the weekend, for safer conditions, for dignity in the workplace. These victories were not gifts handed down from above. They were the product of ordinary people realizing they had extraordinary strength when they stood shoulder to shoulder. The rulers of the world fear nothing more than that realization. Power is not a fixed object locked away in a vault. It is a living force that depends on where we, the people, decide to place it. When we are divided, that power scatters, and those at the top exploit us with ease. But when we are united, when we find common ground, that power multiplies beyond measure. It becomes unstoppable. That is why movements born from crisis, from pain, from injustice have always been the ones to transform society, because people discover that surrender is not survival, solidarity is survival. Imagine the courage of a single worker standing alone against an unfair employer. The risk is enormous, the chance of change slim. But imagine that same worker joined by 10, 100, 1,000 others, all raising their voices together. Suddenly the balance shifts. Suddenly what seemed impossible becomes inevitable. That is the alchemy of unity. It transforms weakness into strength, silence into thunder, resignation into revolution. And let us remember, this strength is not theoretical, it is practical. When people stand together, they win wages that lift families out of poverty. They win schools that educate, healthcare that heals, laws that protect, and communities that thrive. Every freedom we enjoy today, every right we often take for granted, was born from people refusing to surrender. The weekend, the vote, civil protections, all were carved into history by ordinary hands wielding extraordinary determination. But there is another hook here, one even more urgent. Those at the top count on us for getting this truth. They tell us we are powerless, that nothing will change, that our voices do not matter. They whisper despair into our ears because they know despair keeps us obedient. Yet despair is the greatest lie ever sold. Real power is not given. It is taken back by people who decide they will no longer live on their knees. So when you look at the struggles of today, economic crisis, inequality, political corruption, do not believe for a moment that you are powerless. Remember, the lesson history repeats again and again. Power belongs to those who refuse to surrender. It belongs to the workers who keep society alive, to the families who endure and rise, to the communities who discover that standing together is the only way to stand at all. It belongs to you